Thanks for tuning in to American Family Insurance DreamBank page, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams and are committed to helping you pursue yours. I'm Madeline, and today I have the honor of introducing John Zeratsky and Dr. Christine Whelan. John is a veteran technology designer, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of Sprint and Make Time. He has worked with more than 200 of the world's most important and innovative organizations, including Google, Harvard University, Slack, IDEO, and Netflix. Dr. Christine Whelan is an author, professor, and speaker. She's the author of 5 books, most recently, The Big Picture, A Guide to Finding Your Purpose in Life. As a clinical professor in the School of Human Ecology at University of Madison, Dr. Whelan teaches classes on happiness and well-being. All right, take it away, John.
Thanks, Maddie, and thanks everybody for being here. This is actually my second time at DreamBank, the online version. It's really exciting to be back. As Maddie said, I've written a couple of books. First one, Sprint here. It's all about how teams can get started with big projects so they can focus together as a team on the work that matters. Second one is called Make Time. And this is a book about how individuals and teams also can make sure that they're structuring their time around the things that really matter to them. But sometimes when I'm talking with people about this stuff and teaching it, I get questions which are like, what if I don't know what matters to me? You know, these are very honest questions. It's like, that's great that you've given me this framework for how to make time, how to structure time, but what if I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing? So I'm excited to be here with my friend Christine. Christine is a professor at UW-Madison. She's an author, and most recently she wrote this book called The Big Picture, which is a really great guide to how to figure out what your purpose is. You know, what is that kind of big thing that does deserve your best attention and deserve your energy and your time? So, Christine, if somebody comes to you and they say, how do I figure out my purpose? How do I figure out what I should be doing with my life? What do you say to them?
These are huge questions. Thank you, John. It's so fun to be here with you and to do this conversation. So these are really big questions of purpose and meaning. And so I believe in breaking down questions into small steps. And there's lots of research that shows that if you break down a big daunting topic into a series of small steps, then it actually can become a kind of exploration of possibilities, right? And a way for you to find things out about yourself. So I instead of thinking about purpose as this one singular life aim, I encourage people to think about a purpose mindset. And I define a purpose mindset as using your gifts in keeping with your values to make a positive impact on the lives of others. And so those are the questions that I ask people. So if they say to me, how do I figure out what my purpose is? Well, I say, first of all, what do you care about most? What are your values? And happiness is not a value. That's a byproduct of living your values, right? And so things like honesty and integrity, or sustainability, organization and focus, all these things can be values. And then what are your gifts? What are you good at? So what are the things that you can do, but also that you like to do, that you want to do? And then who do you want to make a positive impact on? So it could be individuals, it could be groups, it could be causes. And when you get people to think about those 3 things, then all of a sudden, if you put them together in what I kind of call the beginnings of a Mad Lib's purpose statement, because I value, and then you insert your values, I will use my gifts insert my gifts to make a positive impact on the lives of, and then you insert the people that you want to help and the causes you want to help. And so when you put that together, that's kind of my quick back of the napkin kind of answer to what is my purpose. And it's kind of a fun exercise for everyone to try.
Yeah, totally. And that's advice that we give a lot too in our books, is when you're faced with something big, a big project, a big change, always try to find that way to break it down into little pieces. And one thing that I really liked when I was reading your book, The Big Picture, was that you had, like, if I remember the layout correctly, you had like a few pages that were just like lists of values.
Yeah.
Like all the stuff that you were just describing. And like, that was really helpful for me, because I think that I have a pretty good sense of what matters to me, but I think it can sometimes be it's a challenging thing to think about. If you just ask somebody, what are your values? What do you care about? It's like, well, where do I start? And so for me, just seeing that list of those concrete things, it's almost like a menu, like if somebody asks, what do you want to eat? You're like, I don't know. But if you see a menu, you're like, that looks good. And so I really appreciated that approach, is sort of like laying out these menus of like, which of these things resonate for you?
Well, and you did that too in your book and in Make Time. And that was one of the things I loved about your book as well, right? Because it wasn't a one size fits all, like you just need to do this to be productive. Instead, you laid out a menu of options under each section for people to try, which is, interestingly enough, the traditional approach to a self-help book, to a guidebook, has historically been a very prescriptive book, where you tell people, follow these 3 to 5 to 7 steps and you will be happy or productive or whatever. And neither of us did that in our books, right? We both offered this menu option, which, by the way, is, according to all of my research into the self-help industry, is better for people in terms of personal change. And it's also academically much more honest in terms of how behavior change really works.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of times we get this advice, or people give advice about passion. There's a lot of trite sayings like, follow your passion and the rest will take care of itself, or whatever. What do you think about that? Is there some truth in there, or is that bad advice?
So I don't think that you can just follow your passion and be a huge success, right? Because passion is an interesting word. Passion it comes from the Latin root pati, and pati means to suffer for something worthwhile. I'm serious. So when people think about their passion, they think of something that they always enjoy, but passion actually really is something greater that you want to work for, something that you care about, something that is worthy of your sacrifice for a greater good. And so that's why passion and purpose actually come together as roots in a linguistic sense. But in a practical sense, obviously, when it's where the rubber meets the road. It's whether you are actually setting goals and making time, right? Mm-hmm. And prioritizing, having some laser focus, and doing the things that you say in your book. And so, as you and I were talking about a little bit earlier, I assigned in my consuming happiness class, I assigned both my book and your book, John. So both The Big Picture and Make Time. And I had my students do both of these books, and they loved the combination of them, because they said my book was about those big questions of why it matters, and your book was really about the how of how to make it happen. And so combining those two together, I mean, we should just take our show on the road, clearly.
Yeah, once we can get out on the road again.
Details.
Yeah, for now it'll have to be a virtual show.
So I mean, I think that combination is, so passion is great. It's just that you actually have to do it every day, and knowing that passion and self-sacrifice often go together. Also, by the way, your passion does not have to be what you get paid for. So many of us think that we must be passionate about our paid jobs, and it's wonderful if you can be. And certainly that is something that we really all want to go for. But honestly, especially in a really tough economy right now, the idea is it's very purposeful to put food on the table. It's purposeful to work and support your family. And then, and your passion may be a hobby or something that you make time to do so on the side.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if there's any research behind this, or this is just sort of an observation that I've had, but I often feel that sort of passion, or that intrinsic interest or drive, it comes from developing familiarity and mastery with a skill. It comes from getting those rewards of being able to put food on the table, and things that I didn't get into, or I didn't start doing because I just loved them. For example, writing. I've always had some natural talent for writing, but never really had a drive to be a writer. But then over time, as I just happened to be doing it in the work that I was doing as a designer in the tech industry, as I found that it was making a difference, it was helping me in my work, and I was getting positive feedback from my colleagues, then I began to really love it. And so I don't know, is that something that has shown up in your work and in the research, or is that just sort of something that I've observed?
No, absolutely. So the idea of actually walking the walk, living your purpose, living your passions, doing the things, that reinforces it. And so much of your work is about helping people actually follow through on a day-to-day basis. And that's hugely important. So I call this purpose-based commitments, the small things that we can do to put our larger purpose into effect every day. And the more that you engage in those purpose-based commitments, the more you build something in academic research. It's called self-efficacy. And so self-efficacy is the feeling that I am great because I've accomplished something. Self-esteem is where you think you're great. You know that you're great because you're you. And self-esteem is really important too. But self-efficacy is when you see yourself doing these things over and over again. You get the compliments, you get the good feedback, you see your career improving, you see your skills improving, and you say, yeah, I want to keep doing that because this is something that is helping me help others and helping me build my career.
Yeah. All right. So, this might seem like a weird question, but what about like midlife crisis? Or what about, or any crisis, doesn't have to be midlife, but what about, I think there appear to be patterns in terms of where people go through periods of crisis, the so-called quarter life crisis and the midlife crisis. And then, sometimes people go through crises around retirement age as they're sort of adjusting their identity to their new lifestyle. Mm-hmm. What's going on there? And do you have any advice for people who might be in a situation like that?
Yes, or maybe a crisis around a pandemic, where we see everything all thrown out of whack, and our schedules change so dramatically, or our jobs change, right? So the thing that happens in times of transition is that sometimes we are pushed by pain. Right? So we're pushed by something bad happening, and then we have to change. Other times we're pulled by possibility of opportunity. And regardless of whether you're pushed by pain or pulled by possibility, that moment of transition can be really scary. And actually, as we get older, there's research that says that it gets scarier, right? So, get used to the things that we're doing, and we don't want to change them so much. So knowing that why, that larger why, is really important. And sometimes it's kind of cool to look back in time and see all the purposeful things that you've done. And this is where, and this is actually where, keeping a journal, taking notes on the things that you've tried. And actually, in your work, when you talk about the importance of reflection, each day on the things that have worked and the things that haven't, you can kind of pull back and you can look back through your career as well, and a little bit of reflection on what has worked and what hasn't, and then how you can apply things to the next stage of your life. I often liken it to packing your bags for a journey. Right. So if you're backpacking, you need different things than if you're going on a trip to Paris, or if you are going on a picnic in your backyard, for example. So, all the time we need to pack different things. And as that expression says, what got you here, isn't gonna get you there. Yeah,
totally. The reflection that for everybody watching, the reflection that Christine was describing, this is we have a little template in our book in Make Time. This is Make Time, and this is our notes template. And you probably can't see, but it's very simple. There's it's coming out of focus, but there's 6 questions, and the questions are, what was today's highlight? So what was that one thing that you really wanted to make time for? Did you actually make time for it? How focused did you feel, and how energized did you feel? What did you try specifically in order to make time? What tactics did you use? What were the concrete things? For example, maybe you say, I'm going to leave my phone in a different room while I go to bed, so I can, so that I can get a good night of sleep. And then which ones are you going to try again tomorrow? And then the final question is, what's a moment that you're grateful for? And so one of our philosophies with this book was to try to come up with things that were really easy to do every day. I think sometimes, I can certainly relate to this when I hear advice like you should keep a journal. I think that sounds like a lot of work. That sounds like a big commitment, writing out the longhand stuff. And so, we've tried to come up with formats where we kind of distill it down to something that's very easy to do. It takes a couple minutes every day, very much like your advice about breaking down big scary things into small, approachable or fun things. So yeah, big fan of reflection.
So this is the other thing that I really loved about your book, John, is that one of the things that you do throughout the book is that it seems like you tested all of this advice on yourself to figure out what worked and what didn't for you. Is that right? And what were your experiences testing that out? And have you and what's happened recently?
Yeah, so I wrote both of these books with my good friend and co-author Jake Knapp. And Jake and I started working together in the tech industry. We were both at Google, and we were in this role together at Google Ventures, where Google would actually invest in an outside company, so a startup that was unrelated to Google, and then we would go inside those companies and kind of help them out like consultants. And we would go into a different company every single week. And so we realized after we'd been doing this for about a year that we had this amazing laboratory, this opportunity to go inside these companies and say, let's adjust things a little bit and let's experiment with kind of the defaults of how you're spending your time together as a team, and let's see what works. And so we came up with this thing called the design sprint process, which is a 5-day process for teams who are starting something new, some big new project. But we realized after we had run about 150 of those sprints that we could also apply the lessons we had learned to our individual lives. We didn't need to wait for this big project where everybody came together for this super cool workshop. We realized that we could actually structure our time and focus on the stuff that mattered every single day. And so that became make time. And sort of the big lessons were that we saw this amazing power of focusing on one thing at a time. So if for each day you sort of figure out, all right, what's the thing today that matters more than anything else? And how can I build my day around that? We saw how amazing it was when people worked without devices, kind of pulling at their attention all the time. And obviously we can't live our lives without devices, nor would we want to. We wouldn't be having this conversation right now. We wouldn't be able to do all the things that we need to do. But if you can sort of be in control of how you use that technology instead of being stuck in a reactive loop of always grabbing for the phone, always pulling to refresh, letting the next Netflix episode immediately start after the previous one ends. If you can kind of cut that off, then you can have the ability to focus your attention on the stuff that you care about. We also saw how important it was to manage the energy of people who are working together in those projects, and how for us, we think about this stuff and we talk about what's going on in our brains and decisions and all the things that we write about in our books. But if we're not well, if our bodies aren't well, our brains don't work right. And so that needs to be a part of the equation as well. And then the final step, the final kind of big lesson that we learned in all this experimentation was really about reflection, about how if every day you can kind of look back on the day and say, how did it go? Was I able to actually spend my time on the stuff that matters? If you can do that, then it kind of doesn't matter if we wrote the right things in this book. It doesn't matter. I mean, I think we did, because the stuff that we put in here, it works for us. But I think it may be the case that what works for you is completely different. There might be a totally different set of habits and tactics and routines that make sense for your life. And as long as you have a mechanism for trying those and noticing when they're working, then you're going to find success. Then you're going to be able to make time for the things that matter. And so we just think that's a much better approach than us writing down, here's what we think you should do, because we just don't think that's honest.
Yeah, exactly. So it builds self-efficacy because people are doing it themselves and feeling really motivated. But the other thing that my students said as they were working through your book was that it helped them reduce their anxiety, especially right now in a pandemic, right? Because when everything is uncertain, by the way, in terms of like my top list of words that I hope to never use again after this, it's a time of uncertainty. Right? But whenever
it's now more than ever.
Oh yeah, now more than ever. That's another. Yeah. But with all these things, uncertainty increases our anxiety, right? We like a plan. Human beings like to plan and to be organized and to feel like we are following our schedules. And so these exercises that you've put together and that worksheet really do help people figure out what's important, the thing that's going to be their highlight, and then how to focus, and then also remind you at the end of the day that you've done something meaningful. So my students were finding that it really reduced their anxiety. Have you been hearing that from other people?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes from two places. I think one is the more proactive side of it. So identifying that thing you want to make time for, building a routine around that thing. There's this great metaphor from the writer Annie Dillard about how a schedule is like scaffolding for your day. And so, you imagine a painter setting up the scaffolding next to a building, and then once it's up, then they can stand on the scaffolding and they got both hands free and they've got a safe platform. It's sturdy. They know that they can work and focus. And that's what a schedule is like too. When we know that our schedule is there, our routine is there, we're free to focus on the things that matter. But lately, what happened is it's almost as if the scaffolding got knocked down, and now we don't have that solid surface to stand on. Now it's like we have to go and get the ladder out of the garage and stand it up on the side of the house every time we want to do some painting, which means we got to work with one hand only. We're worried about falling. It's a tenuous situation. So people, I think, have found a lot of sort of stress relief from putting their own structures into place, putting their own scaffolding into place. But the other one that I think is really interesting is about the effects of what we pay attention to. And in the book Make Time, we wrote about some research that I learned about from another book, a book called Wrapped by Winifred Gallagher. That's R-A-P-T, like rapt attention. And she writes about how our experience of life is not so much determined by what happens to us, but it's determined by what we choose to pay attention to. And this is one of those concepts sounds like kind of, I don't know, it either sounds really dumb or like really obvious to you, but I think it's actually super powerful because it's true and because it's a thing that we can control. So right now, in a time of great uncertainty, in a time when we are feeling so overwhelmed and so unsure of what the future holds, we can control what we pay attention to. So, one of the biggest ways to apply that is like, your habits around reading the news. I think it would be easy to just read the news all day long or watch the news or refresh Twitter or whatever. Yeah, because there's always something new, right? There's always new information. But if all you're doing is exposing yourself to the bad news that's going on in the world, then your sort of experience of the world is going to be a negative one. Now, you don't want to cut yourself off completely, but I think a lot of the people that I've been talking to lately have found success in using some of the ideas from the book to really create barriers and create schedules and say, you know what, I'm going to allow myself to read the news once a day or once every couple of days, but I don't need to follow it 24/7.
Yeah, I think so. Both of those are such great advice. I mean, I love the painting and the scaffolding analogy because that's so true. And that's how, at least I felt like every day I try to haul out the ladder and start painting, with one hand and thinking I'm going to fall over at any point. And of course, I don't get nearly as much done. And so one of the things that I developed along those same lines was this little pandemic purpose statement for people to potentially do on a daily basis to sort of figure out what matters most and why it matters, and then the purpose-based commitments that they're going to make during the day, while also embracing the fact that these are anxious times, while also embracing the anxiety. And so to me, this is also part of it. There is anxiety around getting that ladder out every day and climbing up and wondering if you're going to fall off.
Yeah.
And if we just try to push that to the side, then I think we're less productive. Right.
Yeah.
So actually saying, okay, here's what I'm worried about today. Here's what I'm anxious about today. I'm going to put this out on the table, and still I will make purpose-based commitments to get the things done that I want to do. And so for me, that's been very helpful. And I've also tried to do that with my kids and with my family. And this, John, is an idea that I have for you. I think we really need to do the Make Time book, but for families. Because it's quite different when you have lots of competing things that are highlights for different people. So how do you make time for everybody's highlight? How do you, especially as a caregiver, how do you make sure that you get your own stuff done while also making sure other people do? And those are challenging but not insurmountable questions. And so as I've been applying the advice from your book, that's what I've been working with.
Well, I would love to hear, because I don't have kids. I'm married, and we have two cats, but we don't have any kids. And so people are always asking me, like, how does this stuff apply if I've got kids at home, homeschooling, doing all that stuff. So what have you found? What is working for you these last couple of months?
Right. So I have found that, so my partner is really good at working in the midst of all the chaos and in short blocks of time. I am not that person. So I've decided that, for example, my real prime works time is like between 2 and 7 o'clock. Terrible time to try to work when you have a 4, 6, and 8-year-old like I do.
Right.
But I've managed to carve out a couple hours in the afternoon to do that by arranging the schedule so that I'm doing most of my stuff with them in the morning. And so figuring out what time works best for me and then what time works best for them. And then also asking for help when you need it. I think the biggest challenge for me personally is when I have that alone time and I have that work time, to not spend that time looking at the news or doing other things, being distracted, right? So this is something that you talk about so much, is how to have laser focus. And I used to totally be a laser focused kind of girl. I would get into my office and I would go. But working from home, man, I don't know. I must have left my laser focus in the refrigerator when I opened it for the 17th time in an hour.
Yeah, it's there are a different set of distractions at home. There's things like the refrigerator. There's things like your family members. But another one that I've been struggling with, and a lot of folks have been struggling with, is just the low friction, or sort of the reduced friction around spending time online, because now we're kind of doing everything online. And so if you're already in front of a computer, it's that much easier to flip open a tab to check the news or to check Twitter or whatever. It's just very, very immediate. It's very much at your fingertips. Whereas, maybe in a pre-pandemic times, you'd be at the office and you'd have a meeting, but then you had to get up and you had to step away and walk somewhere, and then it's time to go because you got to pick up the kids. And it's like you at least have these moments that kind of break that like connection between your brain and the internet.
Right.
But if nowadays, if you're not careful, that can just you can stay connected, you can stay plugged in all the time. And so I've been doing things, kind of extreme things, like I've been overnight, like I charge my phone inside of a cabinet so that it's not there. Like I have to actually go and make a decision to get it out. I use this app called Freedom on my computer to block access to the New York Times and to other news websites. So even if I do have that little impulse, to check it, which happens more often than I would like to admit, as soon as I go to that website, it's like, oh yeah, I blocked this for a reason. I created this barrier so that I didn't have to try to, be perfect and exercise willpower to avoid getting sucked in.
Yeah. That's so super important, because that's what the research shows, is that if you have to exercise willpower in the moment, you've kind of already failed. The best thing to do is to remove the temptation, and lead us not into temptation, right? To remove the temptation around you and to only have like the good choices in front of you. And then you don't have to exert that, that willpower. But setting the schedule for the day is really useful. My kids in their Zoom meetings, their teacher has them with their assignment notebook. Every morning, what are you going to do today? And having them write in their assignment notebook what they're going to do. And every time I look at this, I think, all of us adults should have that meeting with ourselves every morning, right?
That's so cool.
Use your Make Time your Make Time worksheet as a way to sort of prioritize. And then if you're interested, I have my big picture pandemic worksheet available free online right now on my website, and people can download that, and you can do that with your family too. And then you have the why and the how of how you're going to spend the day.
Yeah. Maybe Maddie can post the links into the chat feed. But is it ChristineWhelan.com?
Yeah, ChristineWhelan.com, and then there's a link right in there to the pandemic purpose. Video and the thing.
How often do you recommend people do that? Is it like a daily thing or weekly or monthly or?
So I've been doing it. So I'm recommending it right now in these really weird times. I'm recommending it daily because then you can set these purpose-based commitments for that day. So my purpose-based commitment that I give as an example is that I'm going to have like a baked potato bar with my kids. So I'm not talking like, earth-shattering stuff, right? I'm talking about these small step things, but if you frame them in this idea that this is purposeful stuff, because it's in keeping with my values of spending time with my family and using my creative energy in cooking and things like that, right? Then you feel more worthwhile about the thing that you've chosen to do. And I think you kind of think about those as your highlights of the day too, potentially.
Yeah. So if you go to Christine B. Whelan, is that?
Or Christine Whelan, just Christine
Whelan.com and check out the purpose statement, and then go to maketime.blog to get advice and get some tools and resources on how to translate that intention, that purpose into what you're going to do day to day. Hopefully that's a set of tools and set of tactics that will really help you feel like you're making the most of this time. You're not just kind of moving through it in a blur. You're not just on autopilot, but you're, obviously none of us wish this was happening, but I think the best that we can do is try to really check in with ourselves and be honest and translate what we're learning from ourselves into concrete everyday actions so that we're doing our best to spend our time on the things that really matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we make a great team.
We'll be on the road soon, just as soon as we can.
Yes, follow us. Sponsored by DreamBank.
Thank you guys so much for coming on. Something fun that we're going to be doing is if anyone that's still watching wants to add a comment or what you learned, we are going to, I'm going to go through the comments and just pick some winners to send some books to, because why not? So feel free to comment in the next 20 minutes. I'll probably go through and pick a winner and contact you guys. So that's something fun. But a little takeaway for me, last time you were on, John, and you gave tips, I kind of disclosed that I had no strategy in managing my time. I was just straight up wilding it. And since then, it's slow progress. I now actually use my Outlook calendar, how most people probably do, but I block off time opposed to just waiting for someone to put time on my calendar, and then those big chunks of time trying to figure out what I'm going to do. So even my free time is now scheduled, which my productivity actually increased a lot. So thank you for that tip. I was taking notes like crazy today, so I'm excited to start implementing some of the things. I'll keep you guys posted.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you so much. You guys,
thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Question. So I don't think we have any questions in the post. You answered Nancy's. So thank you guys. I hope everyone has a great day. For anyone listening, if you want to like our page and you can watch more fun DreamBank videos. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.